Hey guys, Jake here with 8020 Media. Today we are bringing you some DIY content with our trusty old 5.3 Vortec 2002 Chevy Suburban 1500. We're going to be doing a number of things today, but this first video is going to be how to change the brake pads and the brake rotors. So we've got a set of front brake pads and front brake rotors, and we're going to go ahead and get into a DIY on how to replace those yourself at home. So the first step is we need to get the vehicle in the air, get the front tires off the ground. But before we do that, we're going to want to go ahead and loosen the lug nuts, because once the wheels are off the ground, you're not going to be able to do that. To get to the lug nuts, you're going to have to remove the cover that's right here. There's 6 bolts on here. They're 21 millimeters. Once you remove these, you'll be able to get to the lug nuts, and then you can loosen the lug nuts, get the car off the ground, and then take the tires off. Alright, so one of the things I should have mentioned before we got the car off the ground, however, you can still do it now. One of the things that we like to do is remove the brake fluid reservoir cap off of it. It's located right here in the driver's side of the engine bay. Simply just take the cap off and set it right there in your engine. The reason being, we're going to try to decompress the piston so that we can get the new brake pads to fit in there, just since they're tough to fit without decompressing them, because we now have a thicker rotor and a thicker pad. And so when we decompress them, we're going to be pushing fluid back through the system, and so opening it up will make it a little bit easier for us to decompress them, and it'll also prevent any air from getting into the system. But anyway, so now we've got the car in the air, we've got our wheel off, and so we have full access to both the caliper and the rotor. And so the next step from here is to go ahead and get all the bolts undone that need to be undone, so that we can one, get the brake pads out, but then also separate the caliper from the rotor as well. And to do that, we have, let's see, there are 4 bolts that need to be undone. There are 2 bolts on the back side. They're 18 millimeter bolts, and those are the mounting bolts that actually mount the brake caliper to these control arms and to the wheel hub here. And then you have 2 other bolts here, which is a T55 Torx bit. And what those do is hold the caliper together, since we do have a kind of 2-piece caliper here. So once we remove those, we can remove this piece of the caliper, and then we can access the brake pads that are within here. Alright, so we just removed the 2 caliper bolts. Like I said, you need a T55 Torx screw, since it's not a traditional bolt. Now that we have these 2 out, we should be able to separate the caliper. Which, it's still compressed in place, and so it will take a little bit of force to get it off. But a little bit of wiggling. And you should be able to get it off just like that. And what you can see in here, these are the pistons, and so these are the things that we will need to kind of compress back inwards, because as you could tell right there, that was hard enough to get off. And now that we're putting new brake pads on here, the brake pads are going to be thicker. We have a new rotor, so the rotor is going to be thicker. And so the new rotor and brake pads are not going to fit in this, so we need to compress these all the way back in. But we're just going to go ahead and set this aside for a second. You never want to let this hang, because this is connected directly to the brake line, and so letting it hang could put a lot of pressure on the brake line and cause it to go bad. But fortunately, you can just kind of tuck it back here and rest it on the control arm that's down there. And so now from here we have access to our brake pads. And so if all you're doing is replacing your brake pads, that's as far as you need to go. We're going to go ahead and take these brake pads out now. There are some clips on here. These things slide out pretty easily though. Just takes a little bit of force, and the brake pads come out just like that. If all you're doing is your pads, you can take your new ones, slide your new ones on there, and then go ahead and slide the rest of the caliper back on top of it. Like I said, you will need to compress these back in a little bit. Sometimes you can do it by hand. Sometimes you might need a clamp to do it. But since we are actually replacing the rotor as well, we're now also going to remove the mounting brackets that hold the caliper to the rest of the suspension here, so that we can get this bracket out of the way and then pull the brake rotor off. And like I mentioned, to do that, it is two 18mm bolts. Now, I did loosen these bolts earlier just to make them easier to take off for this video. However, the bolts, if you haven't changed your brakes, and as long as we have, are going to be extremely tight and stuck in there. And so my favorite thing is a little bit of WD-40. Get yourself a big wrench, and then I also always keep some type of kind of steel piping around to get extra leverage. And so what you can do is put your wrench inside that piping, and then this gives you a lot more leverage to be able to loosen those really tight bolts. All right, now with those two bolts out, this bracket just pulls right off, and so does the rotor. Sometimes the rotor can feel like it's stuck on there. There's nothing that holds the rotor in place. If it does feel stuck, take a hammer or a mallet or something and just hit the sides of it until it starts wiggling. Once it starts wiggling, it just pulls right off. All right, now we can go ahead and get our new rotor on there. And from there, we're gonna go ahead and put this bracket back on, mount this back up, and tighten it up. All right, so once you get the caliper bracket put back up, you can go ahead and put your new brake pads in there. Pretty easy to get them in there. I will note though that you do have to put a little bit of force just to get them in, kind of slide it in, and then you gotta press really hard to get these little tabs in place. You can use a hammer if you want to. Hitting the back side of this with a hammer is not going to do anything bad to it. And so from here, got the front one in. I'm going to go ahead and get the back one in as well. And then once we've got, this is actually the wrong side, I need to go grab a different one. But once we have both of our new brake pads in place, then what I'm going to do is go ahead and compress these pistons back in, and then we're gonna go ahead and mount it back up. So like I said, the best way to do this is if you have a clamp, some type of C-clamp, you can either clamp each side individually, or what you can do is take one of the old brake pads and just put it up against it like this, so that you could clamp it right here in the middle and bring both of them down at the same time. But you will notice the new pads are significantly thicker than the old ones. And the rotor itself is thicker too. And so with how compressed these are right now, there's no way we're going to be able to get this back on without compressing them. So like I said, use a clamp, get those things in there once your pads are in, and then you can bolt it right back up. All right, so just to show you what I was talking about with the C-clamp, went ahead and got mine set up here. All I did was take one of the old brake pads, put it over each one of the pistons in here, and then you can set your C-clamp up kind of right in the middle, and then as you twist and tighten it, it will compress the pistons back inwards so that you can get it back onto the rotor with the thicker rotor and your new brake pads on there. So once this is compressed in far enough, I'm going to be able to slip this right back on top right here, put these 2 bolts back in, and that's really all there is to it. All right, so once you get this back on, get these 2 bolts in here. All it is tightening everything up. Make sure you tighten these 2 up and then tighten up the 2 18mm on the back. And that's about it. So overall, it's a pretty simple DIY. One thing I did want to point out is if you look closely in here and on our floor here, you will see that there's some leaking going on. That is actually from the brake fluid. Like I mentioned, when you compress these pistons on the caliper, it sends fluid back through the system. We took the cap off, and so that actually allowed some of the brake fluid to overflow, but that's fine because if you leave the cap on, 1, it's going to be a lot harder to compress the pistons, and 2, it's possible to get air in your lines. You don't want air in your brake lines, so you can put something down on your floor to prevent that, but completely normal, no issues with that. But overall, pretty simple DIY. Up next, we're going to be putting new shocks on the front as well, and so if you're interested in doing that, we're going to have a video up on that one shortly as well.